Hiya! Today we're talking about Freeing Shakespeare's Voice by Kristin Linklater. She is a very prolific teacher, voice teacher, acting teacher, and she did a book before this that was called Freeing the Natural Voice. And then this is basically a sequel, specifically looking at how to speak Shakespearean text. The book itself is divided mainly into, I would say, two parts. The first part is all about learning how to connect your emotions to your body and how to free your natural voice, I suppose. Well, the second part is much more dedicated to Shakespeare specifically, how to speak his language, his words, and how to do them justice. So in the first part, there's a lot of exercises on how to reconnect your body and your mind, and she talks a lot about changing your reading out loud, the way you do it, the reading out loud pattern. So she says that normally the reading out loud pattern is printed word, I, frontal lobe, thinking about, spoken about. But she wants you to go from printed word to eye, to image, to breath, to feeling, to experience, emotion, sound, and then the spoken word. So a much more settled rather than a brainy kind of talking the text basically, and detaching it from the intellectuality of it and becoming more rooted in the emotion of it. Letting your lines land and really exploring what does this do to your body. And she has a lot of different exercises, which, to be warning, if you get this book, it's going to take you some time, I would say, for the first half of the book, to go through those exercises, because she specifically wants you to do them. And some of the exercises, she says, can take hours. So just be prepared for that. And she also talks a lot about the fact that when we now read Shakespearean text, Elizabethan texts, we look at them almost very detached, and we think a lot of metaphors and things, like when people talk about hell and things like that. But actually, back then, a person's body was believed to correspond to its equivalent in the universe, from the most mundane element to the most divine extension of the soul. They felt that the body was like a physical machine that corresponded to those different divine things like fire, air, earth, and water. And how certain things are more related to more hell type things and more to more divine things. And that we almost do the text a disservice if we look at it as a metaphor, because it is, for Elizabethans, it was reality. That was how it was. Those things were related to hell, those things were related to being divine, and this is where things set in your body, and it's very specific, and she gives a lot of examples of lust sitting in your loins and things like that, or rage in your stomach and things of that, and that's all a very very deliberate, and if you think of it more as a metaphorical thing, you do the text a disservice essentially. She then goes into different types of things that we do. Different figures of speech, such as that Shakespeare uses, alliteration, antithesis, puns, ladders, and a good example of puns or punnage comes from the Taming of the Shrew, so I'm gonna read it. Petruchio, here. I'm not gonna. My pronunciation, I'm German. I don't know. It might be a bit off. Ha, here, sirrah, Grumio, knock, I say. Knock, sir, whom should I knock? Is there a man has abused your worship? Villain, I say, knock me here soundly. Knock you here, sir. Why, sir, what am I, sir, that I should knock you here, sir? Villain, I say, knock me at this gate and wrap me well, or I'll knock your knives paid. My master is grown quarrelsome. I should knock you first, and then I know after who comes by the worst. Faith, sirrah, and you'll not knock, I'll ring it. I'll try how you can solve her and sing it. He wrings him by the ears. Help, masters, help, my master is mad. Now knock when I bid you, sirrah villain. This scene goes on. But basically it's all about different meanings and things of knocking someone. So it's quite funny whenever Shakespeare uses it, and he uses it a lot. Basically it talks a lot about the fact that content needs form, and this is where Shakespeare comes in. So, you know, it explores a lot about like words and images and all of that, but then it goes into the form that Shakespeare gives it, whether that's through his lyrical devices like puns and antithesis, whether that's through the verse versus the poetry, and then he also uses, for example, stage direction, double meanings, bawdry, the, thous, and yous. So the, thou, and you have different meanings. Usually the and thou is more for like higher ranking people, for your parents, for example, and you is more like for people who don't have as much respect, if that makes sense. And he uses it quite specifically. Like sometimes somebody will be talking to a superior but will address them with you, and it signifies something. And if you know those things and you're speaking to Shakespeare in text, those are all clues that Shakespeare has left you to tell you, like, that guy just lost respect for him. He doesn't have respect for this guy. And if you don't know these little things, you'll miss like really important cues. And that's what this book is actually really amazing for. It kind of teaches you that there's a lot more to the language than just that word. There's meanings behind everything. There's a meaning behind whether it's a verse or a prose. There is a meaning whether it's where the line ends. Like everything has a meaning. Kind of takes back to school when it was like, why is this yellow? What's the meaning? But it does all have a meaning, and if you decipher those little things, there's so many clues in the text for you that you could use to like improve your performance of it. So I think it was definitely an amazing book to read. I would give it probably 3.5 stars. I did find it sometimes a little bit difficult to get through. It took me a long time to get through this book. And not as accessible, but it definitely contains a lot of knowledge, especially once you get to this more like the later part about like how to read Shakespeare in text and how to decipher it almost. And I have some examples for stage direction as well as double meanings. So for stage directions, this is actually the sonnet between Romeo and Juliet when they meet. And it's very funny because throughout reading this book, I kept thinking about Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, which I know back when it came out, a lot of people were like, oh my god, it's horrible. Like the old text with this like weird new setting. But to me, as a theatre person, I was like, this is exactly what we've been doing with Shakespeare for like ages, and I think Shakespeare would have loved it. He would have loved like really playing with it and setting it in weird places and I think he would have loved it. But and when I was reading a lot, I was like, oh, they actually did a really good job. Because I mean, when you watch Romeo and Juliet, you know what they are saying, even though you might not know every single word, but you understand what is happening, whether that's the monologue about the dreams, whether that's the prologue, whether that's the sonnet between Romeo and Juliet. The actors, especially, I think some of the like side characters, like I always forget his name. The funniest thing is, I literally watched that movie last night because after reading this book and finishing it, and I saw it was on the BBC, and I was like, oh, let's watch this. Oh my god. I'm gonna have to look it up now. John Leguizamo. When he plays the Prince of Cats, like, it's amazing the way he speaks the text. You know, Juliet's father, whose name I also have forgotten. Oh my god, I know all these people, but sometimes when I don't have to say their names, they're just gone. But yeah, I think they overall did a really, really good job of speaking the text. Also, the weakest were maybe Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes themselves, but I don't think they did a bad job either. But like, if you think about the sonnet, I'm gonna read it. This is especially talking about both stage directions as well as the verse of it. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this. My lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth their rough touch with a tender kiss. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Have not saint lips and holy palmers too? Aye, pilgrim lips that they must use in prayers. In prayer, oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Then move not while my prayer's effect I take. So you can see here the like verse of it. So like A B A B C D C D E F G G. So this is the very typical sonnet form. But also like within the sonnet is the stage directions. You know, it's very, very clear, and they certainly do it in the Baz Luhrmann film, where he basically says, you know, I'm taking your hand, now I'm kissing your hand, now I'm kissing you. And it's really worth knowing that those stage directions are put in. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do all of them, but sometimes it can be really interesting to explore. And then the other one is actually about double meanings. And I'm not sure how much I can say these. I might have to spell some of these out. I don't want to get banned from YouTube, right? So death, die can also mean orgasm. Spirit can be SPERM. Merry can be sexy. Will can be penis or sexual desire. Wit is the same. Reason can be penis or an to stand is to heaven. I think some of these are more obvious than others. Prick and prickling, you know, is again very related to the P word. To stir, again, feel, you know. Horn, tool, most weapons. Phallic, we know. Lap, circle, you know, is usually the vagina. Hour means whore, interestingly. A burden is usually a man's body on top of a woman's. To bear is to feel that burden. A medlar is actually a medlar, a fruit resembling a woman's hell is usually often related, or fire or burning often relates to venereal diseases. Conceive is obviously it's the same. And then the last one I'll just read as it is. Country matters is a pun on the first syllable of country. So whenever you spot those things, there might be hidden double meanings. So don't take things as they are, but be like, oh, does this have actually quite sexual undertones? So yeah, just think about that. And then we come to the big one, I suppose. The thing that everybody wants to talk about, which is the iambic pentameter. So, I mean, if you're studying Shakespeare, especially if you're studying Shakespeare as a foreigner, like I'm still confused. And actually, this book's helped me a lot about how the iambic pentameter works. And the good thing is that English actually on its own already kind of goes by iambic pentameter. And although it's changing a little bit, we are getting a little bit too fond of emphasizing the little words. A good example that Kristin put into this book was like when you are at the airport and they're like, all passengers go to gate 76. Or all passengers go to gate 76. So it's like we rather than saying all passengers go to gate 70, you know. But a hint she gave for how to speak the iambic pentameter is actually listening to your heartbeat after you've been exerting yourself, because it goes da-dum, da-dum. So weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. So this is kind of how you want to read the text. So as an example, you want to go first 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And she actually gives the example of using your 5 fingers to hit the 5 beats that are in pretty much almost every Shakespearean line. So if you have this text, the sun is very hot, so wear a hat. And I would encourage you, if you're practicing it, like overdo it. Like, I wish you'd take me with you to the beach, since brass, nor stone, nor earth, nor boundless sea, but sad, so let me do it like this, but sad mortality or swears their power. And you also have to check sometimes. Sometimes a word might have multiple syllables and they might be pronounced strong. So it's not a firm rule though. So some words are all strong. But it definitely helps you with like how to pronounce it. And yeah, if you're practicing like overdo it, I did when I was going through it and I was like overdoing it, because it can help you to kind of fall into the rhythm. And I actually realized that I naturally speak sort of in this iambic pentameter anyways. And I think it comes from like when I was practicing and when she was like, which of these do you think, how do you pronounce this? And I was doing it. I actually got it right a lot, because I think, again, the English language already does it. And secondly, I think it, you just get attuned to it if you listen to a lot of Shakespeare as well. Something I definitely want to touch on was line endings, because I actually found this chapter so helpful. Because sometimes I have found the line endings in Shakespeare very random. I'm like, why is this line just cut off? And basically, what the important thing to know is that the choice of the final word in the pentameter line is intentional, and the actor who pays attention to how the line ends taps into a rich seam of acting information. So if you're like me, sometimes you'll read a text and you're like, why is it cut off like this? It doesn't make sense. What are you doing, Shakespeare? William, what are you doing? But actually, there is essence in it. You just have to kind of uncover it. It's like when you have to discover like your transitions, you know. But like something that she's always going on about is like, do not abdicate your authority to experts. Like, use what works for you, and you will develop into a way you personally speak Shakespeare. Like, don't be like, this is how I've been taught to speak. But the things you might want to think about, and I guess I'm reading, is why does that person's thoughts end at that end of the line? Why does the emotion switch suddenly in the middle of a line and then apparently run on for 3 more lines without punctuation? Why is that little weak word at the end of a line? And what do these patterns reveal about the character's inner state? The end of a line is not just a breath change, it's an emotional change, a thought change. And you need to allow yourself to alert yourself to that inner change. So yeah, that was definitely very revealing to me, and she actually uses a lot of examples in her work, and I'm gonna talk about like some examples, I believe I've got. Yes, this is from Hermione from Winter's Tale. It's from her and Leonte's discussion, and she finishes. Oh wait, I might be better. So, for example, you will have lines like this: "I appeal," and what you should know is that that could mean that there is a long pause, or maybe it continues in the next line continuously, or there's a third option, I can't remember, but like it signifies something. So in this, for example, because she's very weak, it might mean she goes, I appeal, and then you have to wait. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. For your own conscience, sir, before Polixenes came to your court, how I was in your grace, how merited to be so. Since he came, with what encounter so uncurrent I have strained the appear thus. What you shouldn't do is like over enunciate the last word either, but which I kind of did then. But so she then ends it with cry fie upon my grave, and Leontes continues the line. I'll show you. So she is here, cry fie upon my grave, and then he basically continues the 5 beats, if that makes sense. So this can happen too. So sometimes those broken lines show haste, sometimes they show pauses, but just be alert to it. Make a choice that you think works. But know that a line ending is always intentional, and ask yourself, why did it end like this? The last thing I want to talk about is the fact that, sometimes he uses words like in the sonnet between Romeo and Juliet. Sometimes he uses prose. It's usually deliberate. Earlier Shakespeare uses it a lot more consistently verse-like, whereas later Shakespeare seems to have abandoned the rules a bit, which you can probably when you're a bit famous for it. But there's always a reason. Sometimes if people go into verse, it's usually because they're in a very emotional, heightened state. And don't be afraid of the verse and to really live the verse. The verse is supposed to be like a heightened emotional state. You're not supposed to treat it like prose. Like, it's a different thing. So don't treat all the same, which I think was quite revealing to me as a Shakespearean study. Later on, she also talks about the fact that... Oh, actually, I'm gonna give you like a final quote that kind of sums up this, which is the shift from crackling prose to the piercing images and mounting rhythm of the verse will alter you if you let it. So yeah, just go with it, live with it. You know, it's a good good thing to work on and to understand, like, why is this in verse. And then I want to leave you finally with this, which is: the music of the vowels and consonants serves the words and images. The words and images serves the phrases. The phrases serve the meaning. The meaning is danced by the rhythm. The rhythm is channeled by the form. All of this serves the character's objectives and actions, and all of those serve the story. So don't ever think that something isn't important. It is all important. So lastly, I want to talk about the fact that she talks a lot about how Shakespeare is more relevant now than he's ever been in the 400 years since Shakespeare wrote his plays. And that's because now is a lot more similar to Elizabethan England than any other time period before. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that, but she specifically talks about things like our technological revolutions and the fact that back then, you know, they had the whole the earth isn't flat sort of thing happening, and a lot of scientific things happening. She talks about the fact that, you know, we have certain political and psychological upheavals that have marked the 20th century, and they're similar in effect to those that shook the Elizabethan mind, like science and discovery and reorganizing the world as we know it, and arguing old beliefs with new ones. This is all something that happened in Elizabethan England. And his stories have always told the stories of everyday lives of millions of people who suffer painfully the effects of an unequal society. People who feel powerless in the face of random cruelty of poverty. The most important element is that Shakespeare provides a speaking language in which vast pain can be articulated, the lacrimae rerum. So this is really, really important to kind of understanding maybe the relevance of Shakespeare in our current modern world, if that makes sense, and how relevant he is. And I think that's why Shakespeare is still so popular, because his stories are just everlasting, and the themes in his stories are just themes that people can really relate to and can go, oh my god, yes, totally know this, live this every day sort of thing. And then last thing that I would say is that, and I couldn't talk about a book about Shakespeare without mentioning it, is obviously I'm not really gonna go into the whole, who really was Shakespeare? Was it the man from Stratford who was never actually named Shakespeare? Or was it Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford? Or was it, some people say it was a cohort of writers? I personally haven't really looked into it that much, because to me it doesn't really matter that much actually, but some people feel very passionate one way or another. Kristin certainly is an Oxfordian, as she calls herself, but I would encourage you to really just enjoy Shakespeare for who he is, and the plays he's written, and if you're interested, dive more into like the backgrounds of who could he have been really, but don't let it take away from the brilliance that are those plays.